Welcome, everyone, to our latest in the series of our interviews with leaders in data and leaders in science, as we look to expand on our Future Leaders scheme offering and talk to a range of people. I'm delighted to be joined by Dr. Marcia Philbin today, the Chief Executive of the Faculty of, I want to get this right now, because I know I've said it wrong so many times today. Pharmaceutical medicine is right, because I kept saying
Yeah,
pharmacy medicine earlier. So,
pharmaceutical. Yeah.
yeah, pharmaceutical medicine. I
Mm.
thought Royal Statistical Society was hard enough to say. So thank you very much for joining us today. It's great to have you here, and to pass on your experiences and knowledge to our future leaders and wider audience who will take part in these as well. Before we begin with the interview, I'd just like to remind the audience and yourselves what the Future Leaders Scheme is and how it came about, and particularly why these interviews came about. So as part of the RSS's commitment to promoting diversity and inclusion in statistics, data science, and other related professions, we are launching a Future Leaders program to support data professionals and science professionals from ethnic minority backgrounds to become future leaders. The scheme has been funded by the Academy of Social Sciences, so we're thankful for their participation in this. And the scheme was really motivated by the phrase, "You cannot be what you cannot see."
Mhm.
The scheme aims to celebrate the diversity of the data professions and science professions and to empower those professionals from underrepresented backgrounds to pursue leadership positions within either the RSS or wider communities, other membership bodies, working with us to basically inspire future generations of professionals and scientists as we move forward. In terms of why the interviews and how they came about as part of the scheme, well, when we met with the future leaders for the first time in 2024, it was very obvious that leadership itself was one of the key themes that came out of our early discussions. So how do these people become leaders? What skills do they need to become leaders? Who could they aspire to?
Mhm.
And where do they go for those skills and that knowledge? Is it a network of people? Is it a membership body? Is it their organization? Where do they look for to identify any skills? And what we found was the technical skills and the growth there was obvious in terms of requirements, either with their role or with their profession or standards as such. However, it was really the softer skills and the experiences that they wanted to gain, and that's where we decided to talk to the people in those positions and see if they could pass on any knowledge, and that's where these interviews have come from. So,
Right.
without any further ado, we'll go on to inviting Marcia to answer some of our questions, and you'll be joined by myself, so Ricky McGowan, who's head of standards at the RSS, and Beryl Curtis, who's our senior accreditation administrator at the RSS, representing the future leaders here today, who unfortunately couldn't join us. So, Marcia, to begin with our first question, which usually, as I say, I would begin by inviting the guests to talk about their inspirations and dreams and pathway today. However, as you've seen, I did notice in my research that you were inspired by Lieutenant Uhuru, from most people know from Star Trek, and it's a really important one, I feel, because I think it's a novel inspiration. And how important was that inspiration to you, and how did it lead to your career within science today?
Lieutenant Uhuru is important to me because she represented something that, as I was growing up, wasn't really visible. And when I was growing up in the 70s, usually the um, black people that you saw on TV were either in music, in sports, or criminals. I think there seemed to be a breadth of representation. And so to see someone like Lieutenant Uhuru on a scientific program where she was an equal. I mean, she was a woman as well. She was a woman. She was a scientist. She was a black, but she most importantly, she was an equal to the other characters, and she had an important role to play. And interestingly, when I grew up, and I brought about her biography, and it was really interesting. After the first season, she wanted to leave and go and do other things, but Martin Luther King persuaded her to stay
Oh,
because she represented someone that others at that time could aspire to. Because imagine in America in the
Yeah.
60s, I mean, there wasn't that kind of representation, and they were fighting for civil rights. And he said it was important that she stayed to be visible, to show others what was possible. And so that added a different dimension, which I hadn't known about when I was growing up. And, it's so important, the role model that she was.
It's amazing how I think sometimes when you're in it, you don't see it yourself, and it sometimes
No,
takes the
yeah,
third party to make you aware of sometimes of the leadership skills you have perhaps don't know yourself that you're giving out and having.
yeah,
And sometimes it's not tangible things that you're actively doing. It's just by representation sometimes, and how it's important
exactly.
to to
But
to, to be there.
But there's another aspect of this which we don't always touch on. And we hear about allies and people like that. But Gene Roddenberry, not only wasn't he an ally, he was a visionary in creating Star Trek. And he didn't just have Uhuru. You had Chekhov, who was a
Yeah.
Russian. So you had the Cold War going on. You had Sulu, who was Japanese. And we'd come out of World War II. And so, you know, he had all these people, and he had Spock as well, who was an alien.
Yeah.
Right. So he had this vision of this collective working together for the greater good. I mean, he was a visionary, but he was an ally for humanity.
I mean, that's an amazing way to put it, and a visionary is definitely true. Something that's backed up by science now as well. It's the diverse teams that prevail the best. Taking in different expectations, understandings, viewpoints. It's those teams that really progress faster
Mm,
and come to better conclusions. So I think visionary is an amazing way of putting it, and
mm,
allied definitely is. It takes sometimes other people to lift people and give them that opportunity, and another leadership skill there is on view.
yeah.
um and it's something that I think should be championed more, as you say.
Mm.
um so could I ask you, do you have any challenges yourself that you've encountered, and if, say, gender or race has affected your approach in any way, or any advice you would like to pass on from lessons learned in that?
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about this question, and there's three different parts to this. So, when I was born with a disability with my legs, and this materialized as I got older. And as a result, I had to miss the last 2 years, most of the last 2 years of primary school. And that meant when I started secondary school, I was put into the bottom set. Nobody knew what I was capable of. And, I worked and quickly realized, "Oh, actually, this person's got something about them." And
Yeah.
so, in terms of um, that challenge, what I learned from that is how resilient I am. And when presented with a circumstance, it's making the best of it, right? Because I knew I was in the bottom set, but you know what? I just worked hard, and when I worked hard, passed all my exams, and then for the second year, they moved me up into the top set,
Yeah.
right? And so sometimes when you have a challenge, right, it's making the best of that situation and just doing the best that you can. Um, has a black woman who wanted to go into science, there weren't many role models there, but I had my PhD supervisor, who I just think is another great ally champion. And saw what I was capable of, and he wanted me to do a PhD with him, providing I got the grades, and I did get the grades. I got 2-1. And, he approached me about doing a PhD with him. And that was fantastic because I wasn't sure if I was capable of doing something
Yeah.
like that. But he said, yes, you are. And so, I trusted him and I did it. And then when I started to look for work after doing my PhD, he had a contract with the Ministry of Defense and they were looking for a polymer chemist. And he told me about the role. So I applied, was interviewed, and I got the job.
Yeah.
Right. And it just shows the importance of having someone who can just show you, actually, that path is there, that
Yeah.
one is there. And that's so important. We hear about coaches or mentors, but not enough about sponsors. And the
Yeah.
thing about sponsors is that they will use their connections um, to help open a door
And-
and put and or show you the way.
yeah.
Right? They actively do that, and that's what Dr. Amos was for me, um, and I will be forever grateful to him. In terms of the other challenges, I mean, certainly when I started work, I remember I was the only black person in the whole group, and I was the only, and in terms of like the chemistry, I was the only female. And I do have to say it that I remember once. Oh, and highly qualified PhD and everything. And I remember when I went for my Vivo, and I was really happy. And I remember sitting down doing my work, and I shared an office with this guy, and I was working away, uh, and I looked up, and he sat there like this, like looking at me, and he and he said, "You really do know what you're doing." And I looked at him and I said, "Yes, I just don't know what." I mean, what do you say to that?
That's that's phenomenal. It's and it is. What do you say to that? How do you respond? It's fascinating by having these conversations that we've heard similar stories, especially from women. I think we had
Yeah,
one where a woman walked into a room, and because she was wearing similar clothes, that the seniors in the room just assumed she was catering staff. Yeah, she was, and then were surprised that, exactly as you said, to know
yeah,
what she was doing.
yeah.
And
Well,
it's
on my first day when I turned up for work, so I got to the gate, and someone said, "Oh, are you the new clerk?" I went, "No, I'm a scientist." And then I went and carried on, and then someone said, "Oh, are you the new, I don't know, it must be the administrator or something like that." And I went, "No, I'm the chemist." And this is the thing that I learned, that people look at you and say what you are rather than ask, "Oh, what are you doing here?"
yeah. It really is, and that's educational in itself, isn't it? To be
Mm,
mindful of others and how
mm,
things come across and how you react in that situation as well.
mm.
Because how you react can determine then what happens next as well.
Yeah,
And if you
yeah,
let it affect you, it really can affect you. And but then have, well, know why you're there, know you deserve to be there, and have faith
mm,
in that, and it will come through. And it's a shame we're hearing some of these stories. It's fascinating, especially to see what the approach was.
mm.
Um,
But it still happens now, because I
yes.
remember when I was an assistant director, and had this meeting, and we attended it, and I went with one of my administrators, who was white, and then the lady who I'd invited to this meeting, she came up to us and she put her hand out to the white woman and said, "You must be Marcia."
Oh no.
And then you
It's
think about what she said. "You must be Marcia,"
yeah.
because it couldn't have been me. And she was a senior woman working in an area, and I know for a fact that they do all this stuff about EDI. But here she was.
And another woman as well who you feel has had experienced her own challenges, as we know, because as you've mentioned, that it's predominantly a male environment, especially at senior levels. So it would have been hard enough for her,
Yeah.
presumably, to even get to that position, but to then be passing on those assumptions as well, and the phrasing, as you say, it's powerful in what it's assuming, and the message it conveys.
Mm,
It's scary, but it still happens, and it's
yeah.
important why you do programs and talk about it, like things like this as well, to get the message out there as well, and to tell people that it does still happen. It's important to talk about it, not just to shy away from it, because it's easy not to talk about those times and those
Hmm.
incidents. I particularly as well like your example of sponsors, because we've spoken a lot in these interviews about embracing a network and seeking mentors, but actually sometimes it takes a sponsor, as you say, to go that step further than a mentor and put their own reputation at risk because they believe in someone and they want to promote them and give them the opportunities. That is the difference, the subtle difference sometimes that make that can really give someone the confidence to go on their own
Yeah.
and promote themselves. So I think that is we've not had that before in our interviews, and I think that's a really important one
Oh, thank you.
to come round to. And again, the resilience example I think is great to see opportunities in everything and to seize those. As I say, your talent will shine through. The resilience you show to do that and to see it. Well, if I'm in the bottom group, this means there's only one way to go. I'm going to go up. And sometimes it's harder if you start at the top to see
Yeah.
where to go, and you can be complacent. So I love those examples there. So thank you for sharing those.
Mhm.
So one of the last questions for myself, before I hand over to Beryl, is obviously I can see you've given a lot of time to volunteering and giving back throughout your own career, and this is another example.
Yeah.
And obviously now you're chief executive of the Faculty of Pharmaceutical Medicine, and how which comes with volunteering roles and membership and so forth. So how important has volunteering been part of and being part of a wider community been to you and your development?
It has been essential. And when I give talks, particularly to younger ones, one of the things I always say is if you have a professional society that's related to your discipline, get involved. Because honestly, I mean, I'm a chemist, I'm part of the Royal Society of Chemistry, and the skills I've developed through volunteering, through being I was part of the macro group, and I became treasurer. And so I learned about finances and managing budgets. And later on, that helped me in my day job. I was a school a school governor, and I became chair of governors. And so I was recruiting head teachers and senior leaders. I was carrying out investigations into maybe complaints. I was a non-executive director at my local NHS trust, and there I would carry out investigations into, unforeseen deaths and things like that. So imagine the breadth of skills and experiences that I was able to have, but also the networks that I was able to build as well, because
Yeah.
you can learn so much from others. So I think volunteering with your professional society or as a school governor or with a church, however you want to do it. Often people focus on, oh, this is time you have to give. And yes, there is time, but focus on what you're going to get from it in
Yeah.
terms of your network, the skills, the experiences. It's been invaluable.
It's it's a great response. I often I work for many professional bodies, and I think it's very key that you do get out of it what you put into it, and I
Mm.
think it's not a case of don't let it end at paying your fee, continuing your membership each year. If you really get involved, you'll see the benefit,
Yeah,
and I
yeah.
think it's also important that the professional bodies have that role of sharing the impact that their volunteers make, and in terms of not just for them, but individually what it's meant to those individuals and how they've grown, and giving them life skills, as you say, that they can go on and then use in their day jobs that necessarily they won't have had that access to.
Mm.
What the treasurer role is a great example of that. That's
Yeah,
unless you go and do something like an MBA or a finance degree, you're not going to get access to that kind of information any other way.
no.
And it's a great example of how that's used. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to hand over to Beryl to ask some questions now, if that's okay.
Yes, thank you, Ricky. A few more questions from me, Marcia.
Yeah,
Can I just say I am loving this, and thank you as well for sharing your experiences. I'm looking forward to listening back to this podcast already. But yes,
thank you.
firstly, what advice would you give to your younger self about career development as a whole?
That's a very good question. And I have been asked that question before, And I think the answer always changes because your perspective changes,
Sure.
and the more you reflect on it. But what I would tell my younger self is not to be afraid of opportunities, because sometimes you can talk yourself out of um, something because you think you're not good enough, or
Yeah.
people won't like me, or I don't speak as well as they can speak.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I've learned and that I've seen over the years is that, everybody is a bit of afraid, and not everybody is as confident as they may project.
It's true.
And so what I would tell myself is to give it a go.
Yeah.
Because what's the worst that can happen? Really, what is the worst that can happen? And as I said about the volunteering, you really get out as much as you put in.
Yeah.
And even if an opportunity doesn't work out, there's something you can take from it. You will learn from it.
Yeah.
And I think it's this thing about failure, right? Being afraid of getting something wrong and not succeeding. And I've changed my mindset about that, because failure it's not about failure, it's about what can you learn from that. Because he who never makes a mistake doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So if something doesn't go right, what can you take from it? What is the learning? Right? And how can you do things differently? So that's the message I would give my younger self.
Thank you. That's so powerful. And I think, yeah, fear is one of those things that a lot of people deal with. I mean, I've now come to understand that fear stands for false evidence appearing real.
Ooh,
And yeah,
writing
so
that down.
and
Yeah.
I feel from a very early, was it young age or career young time, there's a lot of pressure to know exactly what your career will look like.
Mm.
And that's just not the case for many. I mean, half the time the individual is not even aware of the opportunities out there. And as you rightly said, it's, all about learning, and opening yourself out to the opportunities that are available, whether you know or not. So
Yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, people say sometimes, "Oh, you've been so lucky." But I always say, luck is opportunity meets preparedness.
Mm,
And I've prepared myself through my education,
yes,
through doing different things, bringing those experiences. And then when the opportunities arise, I'm then ready
ready.
to go for them. So remember, it's about being prepared. And then when the opportunities arise, you can have a go.
Love that. And then moving on, my next question is, so you wear so many hats, and how do you balance it all? How do you maintain your priorities?
That's an excellent question. And it is about what is your priority at that time. So
Mm,
in my younger years, everything was about career, 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 and that's what I was focused on.
sure.
And then when I became a mother, I had twin boys,
Oh.
and if you never had twins, nothing prepares you,
Oh,
right? And they became my priority, and I took a step back from my career. Right, I kept it ticking over. Right? I was happy with where I was. Just kept it ticking over, but they were my priority. And then as I became older, and then I was able to step back into my career, and then it was managing, yes, going after my career again, but also I still had the boys and my husband and family. That was all important to me. So it's making sure I had that balance. The boys are now but they're both at university, right? And I have more time to put into my career, but I'm still there for them if they need me, and for my husband as well. And we go off on our go away if we need to. We can leave the boys, and that's what it is. It's about different stages of life. You have different things which are important at that time, um, and now I feel I have a good balance.
oh, that's brilliant.
Mm.
Thank you. I have two kids under 4, and it feels like they're twins. So And it's just nice to know that you can achieve balance, and everything. And I think it's about you setting what your priorities are, and not feeling
Yeah.
like because I'm taking time out to do some childcare, I'm going to be slowed down in my career.
No. And
Yeah.
I really want to get this message across, particularly to women, right? If you don't want to have children, you don't have children.
Yeah.
If you want to have a children and you want to spend time with them, you do that, right? Because we're going to be working for 40, 50 years.
Yeah.
So, it doesn't mean it's all or nothing.
Yeah.
It just means right now, this is the important thing. And that was important to me. And I have to say, when I became assistant director, I was in MOD for about 24 years. Then I became assistant director. And the boys were 11. And I did that for 3 years. And then the role for chief executive came up. I applied and I got it. So after leaving MOD, within 4 years, I became a chief executive.
Wow.
Prior to that, my career, I was just ticking over.
Yeah.
And then within 4 years, I became a chief executive.
Yeah.
So, as I said, in that time, right, you're still doing still doing some learning, but think about the skills that I gained, just being a parent in terms of, organization skills,
Yeah.
patience, negotiation, influencing, decision making. Right? And they all play in.
Of course.
So my message to women and girls out there, you can, if you want to have your family, you can. If you want to spend time, and for the men as well, if you want to spend time with your kids, you can. Right? You just do it. Just do it a step at a time.
Yeah. That's lovely. Thank you. And then how important is it to you that you identify ways to develop future leaders within your teams, and how do you approach this? You touched a little bit about it when you spoke about your PhD advisor and how he saw that you could do so much, and really pushed you. So how do you approach this with your team?
So with my team, where I see people with particular skills or potential, I provide them with opportunities that will help them to develop themselves, but also develop their skills, but also to provide them with opportunities that they can network with others. And that is one of the things that I am committed to in terms of my teams, and providing them not only with training opportunities, but with development. They may have an opportunity to lead a project, for example, and a project where they can develop management skills, leadership skills, because the two are different, influencing skills. They have the opportunity to manage a budget. Right, all these little things which make a difference.
Yeah.
Right, and then also the opportunity to go and present their work, because so many people are afraid of speaking publicly.
Yes.
So you start small. One of the things that I started at FBM, I called it the SOS project, and it was share our skills.
Oh.
Right, so you bring the team together, and somebody would talk about what they do in their day-to-day role. And even though it's a small team, it's amazing how people still don't know what everybody does.
Yeah.
Because there's just so much detail involved. So we called it the Share Our Skills program. And it was great because they were getting opportunity to learn how to put a presentation together, right? And then present that presentation, but it was in a safe space. And so that helped to build their confidence.
Yes. Yeah. And did you find that with some of the maybe quieter individuals who are not so forthcoming with leading a project, you had to really kind of almost drop them in it to see them fly and flourish, or are your team all forthcoming anyway?
No, what you do, you start off with those, who perhaps be more forward, and then they can see what the others are doing.
Yeah.
And then when it's their turn, can I tell you something? Their presentations were some of the best. Right. I remember one guy in
Mm.
particular who was really quiet, really introverted,
Yeah.
right? And then he does his presentation, and you just think, where did that come from? And he see the pride in his
Yes.
work,
Oh,
right? The knowledge that he had, and he even injected humor. It was fantastic.
no, he just needed a bit more time by the sounds of
It
it.
needed time,
Yeah,
but he needs
yeah,
to be in a safe space,
yes.
and um, and he did it his way. That's the other thing.
Mm,
Sometimes you might think, actually, this is the best way to do it, but and no, I provide the framework,
yeah,
right? How you do it within that framework is down to you. And that's really important because we talk about diversity, talk about inclusion. There's more than one way to do something. Your way isn't necessarily the best way.
sure.
So be open, right, to people doing things differently.
Yes.
Because ultimately, if what's the objective, right? You have an objective you want to achieve. If someone can get to that objective in a way that you hadn't thought of, that's fine.
Interesting, very powerful. We need to be ourselves, and be authentic, and there isn't just one mold, that we have to follow. So,
No, no.
yes.
Mm.
And my last one, sadly, but my favorite question is, what is the one piece of advice towards being a successful leader?
Being a successful leader is about people. And people will only follow people who they believe in and who they trust. Now, if they don't trust you and they don't believe you, I mean, they will still be there, but you won't get 100% out of them.
Yeah.
You just won't. And so, to be a successful leader, one, you've got to know your people, and two, listen more than you talk. You got two ears, one mouth. Try and use them in that proportion. And I have to remind myself of that. Right? I'm not perfect by any means. Honestly, I am not perfect by any means, but I'm aware of it.
Yeah, powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Very enjoyable. Thank you for sharing your personal experiences as well.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm really looking forward to listening back to this. And I will hand over back to Ricky. If there's anything else you wanted to say?
Yeah, I mean that was fantastic, and there's a lot that I definitely know I would second in the team I lead. I would definitely approach those, and I think listening to people is key. Knowing your people is key.
Mm.
That feeds into to them developing and letting them do it their way. I think is important. As I've always said, we progress as leaders and managers, you understand that the people you give the work to develop themselves, they will become experts in it. And so
Yeah.
it's important that you let them flourish and do it. They will know more than you in that field, and then that's perfectly okay. That's part of it,
Exactly.
that's transition, and that's part of it. And something came up in our other call that we did one of these with David Spiegelhalter, and he spoke
Oh,
about
yeah.
leadership and how you develop, and what you said resonated with me, and how you give people opportunities. What you're doing is you're not only giving them opportunities to do that and showcase and to learn, what you're giving them is credibility,
Yes.
experience and credibility. And that's key, because that's
Yes.
when they're able to show confidence and be listened to in other rooms as well, when you're not there to back them up.
Yes.
And that credibility is that's priceless
Yes.
to some of these individuals, and I think that was really good. And the other point I wanted to touch on was the message you convey to women, who if they do want children. We've got a member of staff. I remember at the time when we interviewed her, she'd just come back from maternity leave. She was working
Mm.
3 days a week at her previous employer, and when asked why now, why do you want to leave, her
Mm.
answer has always stuck with me. And it was because she was made to feel that because she was currently working 3 days a week, they stopped believing in her. They stopped giving her opportunities to do more. They felt because she was 3 days a week, she could only do the basic, and it really stuck with me. And I'm really pleased that we hired that individual and we showed, well, you could. I don't care if you work 3 days a week. We will give you every opportunity you want. And
Absolutely.
and I think that's important that across. Don't feel limited. Don't feel pigeonholed. Don't feel that you have to compromise.
No.
You know, there are people out there who do believe in you and will let you grow. So I think that was a really, really good message for you to get across.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think it's been a great call. It's been a great conversation. So thank you so much.
Thank you for asking. Yeah.
No, you're welcome anytime. And I'm glad Beryl as well has enjoyed it as well, because I think Beryl, it sounds like a lot has resonated with you, and
a lot. Even talking about being in the bottom set at a point, I was ill in primary school for a little while, and the same thing happened to me. And it took a while to climb up, you know, and I did eventually. But I could have just, you know, said, okay, well, this is it, you know, and not pushed myself, you know, to get good A levels and go to uni twice, you know. So yeah, a lot of it definitely resonated with me. Thank you.
Yeah. There's so much power that you have in yourself to drive yourself forward despite the barriers.
Sure.
So, you know, use that. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your time again, Marcia. I'm afraid we'll end the call there and let it be. But yeah, thank you so much for your time. I think it's been a valuable talk for all of our listeners.